First off, let me apologize for trying to go live earlier and it not working out. The sound was all wonky. So what I'm doing is I'm recording and I'm going to do an upload. Okay, I thought I was done with Steven Anderson. I would not have to say anything more about him after he got hauled away for a 5150 psych eval. Unfortunately, that is not true. He's out now and he is continuing on with his outrageous behavior, the things he says that are simply not true, and so many other things. So we're going to break this down, including there was financial chicanery that went down this week that really somebody should be in jail for this thing. Okay. If you know who I am, great. If you don't know who I am, I'm Suzanne Tidkemeyer. I used to write for a place called Pathos for 10 years, a column called No Longer Quivering. Now I'm writing for Substack. I have a column called With Strange Fire, the same name as my upcoming book about my years joining and then getting out of one of these high demand religious organizations. That's all I write about mostly is high demand religious organizations and the things surrounding that world. I talk about churches that are more CULTs than anything else. And most of these things are non denominational evangelical churches, many times. And when I was writing for Pathos, I was writing primarily about Quiverful, but also about these types of churches. Quiverful is a label that cuts across so many different denominations, okay? I've known Catholic Quiverfuls. I even knew a Quiverful couple that was Methodist. So many different people. This is their idea of what they think God wants them to do. Okay. I'm in my studio, my art studio today, instead of in my yellow bedroom where I'm usually at doing my videos. I had to shift around because my husband was trying to watch the LSU Ole Miss football game, and I didn't want to hear all the screaming and cussing and carrying on and tussling and the things that he does when he's watching sports that I just have no desire to watch. Let me say first, these are just my opinions. Okay, they're my opinions, they're my considered opinions, but they're still opinions. And you know what they say about opinions, okay? And don't be rude to each other. Don't be rude to me. Don't be rude to anything, you know. People who show up here and they're rude and nasty and vile, I take them and move them to Jerks for Jesus. I haven't done that in a while because there have been so many overwhelming Andersonites that show up licking his rear end and threatening God knows what. This time at least I'm not getting the threats to have my head shaved, but there was some kind of weird, vague threat that someone issued about my elderly mother, who is not online, never answers her phone or her front door, knows that I am, I'm not going to say I'm evil because I am not evil, knows that I am somewhat rebellious. I had kind of an epiphany today while watching Mad Men. I always thought, well, I'm Midge. I'm more like Midge than any other character on Mad Men because I like to paint. I like to do art. But then I had a thought about that when I started watching Peggy with her boyfriend Abe. Abe. I get obsessional, um, outraged. I get that righteous anger and I just start writing. So I'm Abe. Please don't stab me in the stomach. Okay. Back to Anderson. When we last left off, Stephen Anderson of Faithful Word Baptist Church, a new independent fundamentalist Baptist, their pope of this thing, who runs it like a mob boss. Their pope had just been hauled off for a psych eval and was released after however many hours in Arizona they hold you. I'm not sure. It varies from place to place. It can be anywhere from 24 hours to a week. It really depends upon where you are. And I said I wouldn't get a covering while I was in there because it's really not fair. It's not fair to speculate My only real speculation I've done over this is federal law prohibits anybody hauled away for psychovals from ever owning a gun. So this might impact his ability to own a weapon. And he is completely homosexual. He believes in weapon ownership. He believes in gun ownership to a crazy degree. Couple of days ago, before he was put in, I did a video on his beliefs of the 23rd Psalm, saying that it's a roadmap for marriage, and it also means you got to own a gun to defend your wife. Please. No, don't do that. So this week, while he was in, something interesting started. Okay, and it's the throwback to January 2019 when I was still writing for Pathos, and I noted something pretty awful that had happened at the new IFB. Do we all remember? I think it was Donnie Romero was his name, the pastor who was removed, defrocked, however you want to say, from a Steadfast Baptist church. He had confessed to prostitutes and using the wacky weed, the devil's lettuce. And Stephen Anderson and them came in and they took him out. Steadfast Jacksonville, not Steadfast Dallas, where Romero had been, had a pastor by the name of Adam Fanning. Fannin. Why do I always want to call this guy Fanning? It's Fannin. And Fannin was outraged because when all this went down, Anderson started helping himself to the funds at Steadfast Baptist Jacksonville, like a mob boss, like he thought he was Al Capone or something, and like Fannin should have a objection to that. And it was a big pushy shovey between all of them, and it ended up they tossed Fannin. He founded another church. Fannin seems like a pretty reasonable guy compared to most of these, even if he called Sarah Silverman and a WHORE publicly and got in all kinds of trouble. I don't know about that. I don't like these CULT churches where they call women filthy names. And let me throw this out there at you. These guys like to say that I know nothing about the Bible or Jesus or anything else. Knitter, please. I know quite a bit. Still a Christian, you ding dongs. I believe that not all churches are CULTs. Not all Christians are CULT members. But when you have these high demand religious organizations, these taco churches, totalitarian, authoritative church organizations, it's not of Christ. It's not of Christ at all. Okay. So this week, the same thing that had happened in 2019 to Steadfast Jacksonville happened with Pure Words Baptist Church. Now, Pure Words Baptist had left the NIFB over the four eldest kids, exposing the abuse that they suffered at the hands of their parents. And Anderson giving a sermon where he talked about it was biblical to beat your wife, your kids. And even though there's scriptures, several of them say that fathers are not to vex their children, make them angry beyond belief. Once the Anderson kids started saying what had happened, the entire world exploded in that world, that group. And it started to fray apart at the seams. In fact, and Pure Words Baptist wasn't the only church affiliated with Faithful Word that left their little presbytery, their little group. And we got to see Anderson say all kinds of horrible stuff about those people, including the guy from his own church that had contacted the police and said, "Hey, I think this guy is loco, muy loco." That guy, and I'm not going to mention his name, Anderson went after him this week on his Facebook page. Classy. And the guy was tossed. And he has so many people attacking him on Facebook on his own page. I tried to leave a message of support, and he took it off because I forgot exactly what word it was I used, but I used a very mild word where I said I was disgusted over something they had done. And he said, "I'm not taking that. You have so many hours to remove that word." Well, I didn't see it until well after, and he had removed my message, which is his prerogative. But I just thought it was a very, very, very interesting take for him to do, for him to be that messed up over language. So many of these guys are. That's their thing. They want to define everything in some weird ways. Okay, so let me pull up my first little image here. I have all of these images up on my YouTube channel community tab. I put them all up because they were all kinds of not good. They were all kinds of not good. Okay, Pure Words Baptist Church. They posted, "I do not deny giving a $3,000 to Isaac and Solomon for their personal use, quote, charity. Pastor Shelley has given thousands of dollars to preacher friends, especially Stephen Anderson. He would give $1,000 every time, even though it was understood that Faithful Word Baptist Church was covering his traveling expenses. I have the right as a pastor to give charity offerings to whomever I please, just like he did. Pastor Shelley has stolen all the leftover money from the Pure Words bank account and closed the account. He has also called the property manager and canceled the lease for Pure Words. He is currently guilty of doing the exact same thing that people have done to him before. Remember me talking about 2019? Shelley was involved in that too. He is accusing me of missing a rent payment when it was under his leadership. That a payment was missed years ago, and upon me taking the church as pastor, I had to pay double rent. Please do not listen to lies. If you have any questions, contact me personally." Pretty straightforward, huh? Pretty straightforward. So then the next document showed their account. It showed they had an account balance of $28,258.10. Okay, it's a decent balance. Okay, they go back and pull the next one. It's the same page, like 3 days later. It shows a balance of minus $319.81. Okay. And then go back in. Saved all this nonsense because looking at this, I was just kind of blown away because it was just incredibly stupid. Okay, it showed how there's another page showing exactly how much went out over those last couple of days, which was like a 3-day binge. He drained the accounts. And the he I'm talking about is not Stephen Anderson, but Jonathan Shelly. Jonathan Shelly, who, like I said, was involved in the mess that went down in 2019. and ended up taking over when Adam Fannin thought he should have taken over. So then there was a slide that showed exactly what each thing was and what it was and what and who where it went. Several checks for $1,000. Okay, were written. Online transfer to Steadfast Bible Church, Baptist Church, I'm sorry, $25,000. Payment to Chase card, and then they gave the number minus 1,012,891. Okay. Then there were other amounts outgoing for $1,000. So Anderson has tried to say that this was okay. More than that, this was done by Jonathan Shelly, like I said. Jonathan Shelly, who apparently is vying to be Anderson's right-hand man, and he's the mafia enforcer just under Stephen. So they did this viciously to drain all the money out of Pure Words Baptist because they were breaking away from them. And this is what happens when you have churches where there's no financial accountability whatsoever. There are ways that things like this have to be done. The IRS actually has brochures and things that explain legal ways that churches have to be able to account for their money. I'm sorry, I have asthma. So if I'm wheezing and making weird words and not talking right, that's what the heck is going on. There has to be accountability. You have to let the members know what's going on. To have a healthy financial church where everybody knows what's going on, it means that the pastor can't dip his wick in the company eel. And my cat asked, how do you like that? In the company well and take the money. And it happens. It happened in my old church way after I left, where they ran out of money and the pastor started paying himself from all the different like dower funds and things. He just went in there and just wiped those accounts out. When you don't have financial accountability, that's what you get. You get these kind of things happening. So to add insult to grievous injury, when Jonathan Shelly, who's already played both sides of the thing when he talked to John Anderson and tried to say that Stephen beating Susanna was some kind of sexual thing, and trying to agree with John on several things, Jonathan just showed how unstable he was, that he would say anything to anyone depending upon who he was talking to at the time. He has some kind of silly little podcast he calls the Baptist Bias. And his last episode on Rumble was Salvador Alvarez, wildly inappropriate behavior with church funds. I'm trying not to have an asthma attack here. No, Jonathan, you are the one doing the wildly inappropriate behavior. What Shelley has done actually violates a whole pile of laws, especially laws that say that govern how churches are to handle their money. You can't just go in and wipe out somebody else's bank account because you're mad at them. You can't do that. I don't even care if you were a signer on their account. You can't do that. The people that do that are criminals. Like I said, it is fraud. It's a fraudulent transaction from a financial institute. And I am hoping that the pastor of Pure Words has enough wherewithal to report all this. because it's really the only thing he can do. And if he were to do that, that would go a long way. Then Stephen, when he got out, had this to say about the whole financial mess. I got this from his Facebook. My accusers have been paid to lie about me. Why do you think they all went to the same? I'm not going to say the word because it's gross and disgusting. TRANNY. They called Dead Domain a awful name because he pays. Not as far as I know. I don't think Dead Domain's paying for anything. Now there are check images of Solomon and Isaac receiving thousands of dollars from Pure Words Baptist Church to slander me. We know Miriam has earned at least 17,000 for lying about me so far, but you are still not sure who's telling the truth, huh? Okay, so Stephen is trying to slander his children. Alvarez, the pastor at Pure Words, has already said he's helped out those kids, as well he should, because they all have issues as far as I'm concerned. There is just no way that you can come out of that level of childhood trauma and not come away with issues. It's normal when you start having these complex trauma things that happen to you as a kid. It takes recovery. It takes intentional recovery. It takes you doing different things to recover. It's not like, oh, I'm cured. I don't have any more issues. These are issues that will follow you long into your life unless you stop and deal with them. I've talked about this in the past. I'm going to say it again. If you're undergoing these kind of issues, any reason, any level, find a therapist. Therapy can make a huge difference to you and to your life. When I first got my diagnosis for mastocytosis, I had a therapist. And I got my diagnosis right around the time I left my old church. And that therapist was instrumental in helping me navigate the very difficult issues of leaving my original faith community and dealing with a devastating diagnosis that's going to be with me until the day I kick the bucket, which is the reason why sometimes I'm on here and I'm sharp and other times I'm goofy. I'm goofy tonight. Um, so that's really all I wanted to talk about was these documents. I just cannot believe. And for Jonathan Shelly to then go on and accuse the other pastor of financial improprieties when he himself had violated financial laws governing churches and how he handled taking the money and overdrawing their account. I heard the grapevine many times. This is not even the first or second time this has happened. Like I said, I know for a fact it happened in 2019, in January, and in late 2018. And now we're seeing this again, 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 again. Stephen Anderson needs to step down as pastor of Faithful Word Baptist Church and go into therapy himself. Find out why he wants to tell all these lies about people, why he courts controversy, because he loves controversy. He has never met controversy he didn't just love. All you had to do was see how he acted after he got tased that time, how he acted after he said those horrible things about the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, how he acted when one of his parishioners tried to show up at a Obama rally with an AK-47 and pistol. He likes being notorious in a bad way. He just does. He likes the attention it brings him. He likes the control. I've said this before, I'm gonna say it again. What kind of man is so insecure with his own masculinity that he can't take correction? He cannot take any kind of pushback. He can't take anything, but he immediately starts his own religion so he doesn't have to be accountable to anybody. That's not normal. That's not what normal people do. Not at all. And I find it kind of frightening that that's where he goes with all of this. It's just lowest common denominator, my friends. A very weak little man sowing the seeds of his own destruction. And this may well all take him down for all I know. And here's my concern, those people still in his church. I know exactly what it's like to be in a high demand religious organization where you're told to do it the pastor's way or no way. And it's not fun. I've told the story before of many times being called up and said, hey, you need to do this, and not being able to say, no, I can't do that. Instead, it was, you jump? How high, Pastor? I think one of the worst was I used to make worship flags, and I made a number of them in practically every color of the rainbow, lame, rhinestones, you name it. They were fancy and they were quite costly. To make a half round, 9 foot long flag out of, like, say, blue lame with a center that was blue chiffon that had sequins and or glitter on it, run a good $90 in fabric. Unless I managed to, Bleh. Unless I managed to order all that fabric from the fabric wholesaler in Los Angeles that I sometimes would deal with. One time, they went and told me, they say, you are going to make 15 of your flags for the church in North Carolina that we like, that we partner with so frequently. And I did it, but my goodness, I inwardly griped the whole time because you take 15 and times that times 90, and that's a serious chunk of change. A serious chunk of change. And I did it. It was towards the end of my time there. I should have told the pastor to jump up a rope himself, to do it himself. Now, I see that with Anderson, with the people who've come out and have said crazy tales of all the crap he forced them to do. And there was a lot of things. There was every now and then I'll hear stuff and just be horrified. There was a happening that happened in, I think it was June 2019, that I'm not going to rehash here because I've already done that over and over. And the people involved that he threw out that were forced to leave the church didn't even know what their rights were. They did not know that what had been done to them was actually criminal. Some of it. They didn't know. So in these CULT churches, they keep you just listening to whatever the pastor says and saying the rest is the world, the world, the world, the world. Don't listen to the world, it's going to deceive you. Let me tell you something. If your inner voice, and most people will know what I mean by inner voice, if your inner voice says run, guess what? Run. Run quickly. I kept tamping down my inner voice during my time there, even though there were so many times my inner voice was going off and I was struggling not to roll my eyes because I knew better. I knew I was standing there platform and I knew better than I was being claimed or forced or whatever. And sometimes these things would come out hideously weird ways. We had one situation we had this big conference on healing from bondages, and we had a 14-year-old kid in the church stand up and confess. It's got to confess, brother. Confess, confess. He confessed that God was healing him of his addiction to, how should we say this politely so that YouTube doesn't lose their minds? His addiction to PORN. He told about it in great detail. He started talking about his favorite sites online, his favorite ways to look at ladies' breasticles, his favorite um, sites that had wanking material, all of that in so great detail. And nobody stopped him. And I'm sitting there because I can't believe what I'm hearing coming out of this kid's mouth. It was inappropriate. I mean, he could have mentioned the Lord was helping him with personal issues, but he just went into this crazy detail about it. And he was 14. I wanted to go up to him and say, "Kid, you're perfectly normal." Because he was saying how he couldn't control his throbbing biological urges. And he was doing all this horrible, demeaning stuff, and Jesus just healed him of it. I often wonder what happened to that kid because I would have liked to have said, "Hey, kid, you're normal. Those things you're feeling are normal for a 14-year-old boy." But I wasn't brave enough. Again, I was towing the party line at the time, even though I knew better. So many times when I knew better, and I would shut down my inner voice. And you think by that point in my life, in my 30s, I would know better. Because throughout my life, when I've ignored my inner voice and just charged on and ignored the inner voice, it always falls apart. Always, always, always. And I guess you would call that my conscience. My conscience. I've listened to my conscience. Things usually work out. If I ignore that lady and try to make her shut up, bad things happen. So do not ignore your inner voice when it starts telling you that the pastor of the church you're going to is toxic or is asking you for things that are just way more than you can give. You have to be able to have enough self love and self worth to say, "I am sorry, Pastor, but I am not doing that. I'm not comfortable doing that for," you don't have to explain. You just have to say, "I'm not comfortable." If you want to explain, you can do that too, but expect them to try and shoot you down. At our old church, we used to have yearly budget meetings. We'd go over the budget for the next year, and they were open to everyone. And we also had a policy that anybody who was a member could at any time look at the books. Faithful Word and the new IFB, they need to institute that. If it was actually a legitimate church organization, there would be transparency for the money, where the money is going, what it's getting spent on. All I can say is bless that pastor from Pure Words who was helping out the Anderson kids. Somebody needs to help them out. We've all failed them horribly. That was one of my big regrets with No Longer Quivering is that I covered the Andersons and the Anderson kids so many times. I didn't catch all the bruising. I didn't catch the fact that those kids were having the biscuits wailed out of them on the regular. I caught none of that. I knew it sounded pretty awful when Sue started talking about restricting the food of teenagers because, like I said, teenage boys sometimes they need 3 to 4,000 calories a day to keep growing. Teenage boys are just lean meat eating machines most of the time. Not because they're gluttonous or greedy or going to turn fat, because their own bodies are calling for this as they're changing and growing and maturing. So stopping your kid from having healthy foods is just not right. And it really sat poorly with me at the time because at the time that I wrote that, I was still involved with Wait a minute. What year was that? Now I really sound like an old fart. I had been involved with the children's residential treatment program. We had kids coming out of the worst of the worst of the worst of abuse. And the kids there were taught they could have fruit at any time. We always had giant bowls of fruit in the houses. They were allowed to snack on fruit anytime they wanted, if they wanted 3 pieces. And occasionally, if everybody was agitating for a snack and losing it, we would have a locked drawer we could open and give them all kinds of packaged nutritious treats. I mean, that would happen too. If you have teenagers, you must feed them. So anyway, knowing that now, knowing that so many things I was puzzling over at the time actually were abusive is just I can't even begin to tell you what that's like in my mind right now. I feel like everyone failed these kids, myself included. And at the same time, Stephen is now accusing them of making out like bandits or telling their story. No such thing. And none of the people who are doing social media who are talking about this story are making money. This is not a money grab. And I'm sure it wasn't a money grab for Dead Domain either. And this started 9 months ago when Isaac gave his interview. And then a month ago, John and his sister Miriam gave their interviews. And since then, Solomon has done his own video on his own channel. Most people who are talking about this, their end goal is not to make money. I know that is certainly not mine. I have plenty of money. This is not something that interests me at all, too much at all. If I get money, I just blow it on the crap you see in this room. You have any idea how expensive oil paints are or acrylic? They're outrageous. Canvases, outrageous. Just silly little things, outrageous sometimes. Yarn, good yarn, outrageous. It's the wall hanging I gotta finish. The wall hanging I started making out of leftover bits and pieces. So I've said this before, everything I make, and I haven't made anything in a long time, it goes for art supplies, it goes for fabric, it goes for yarn, it goes for sculpting materials, it goes for that sort of thing. And even if I didn't have a penny coming in, which I haven't in a long, long time, it doesn't matter. Monetary concerns are not something that I have. I'm retired. In Costa Rica, on a large investment income. But as I was talking earlier about figuring out I'm like Peggy Olson's boyfriend, Abe in the show Mad Men. It's because of my passions, the things I write about, that I want to see people become free. I talked about this recently. One of my biggest passions is to make sure that nobody goes through what I went through because it was so incredibly awful on so many levels. And I was completely in the dark about so many things until I left. So many things that happened were toxic. I want no one to undergo that. My heart is with the mothers of these children, especially, and the children too, not just the mothers, but mothers and children, because they get caught in these things. That's the other thing I keep seeing all the time that I got to defend. People saying, well, if it was so awful, why didn't Susanna Anderson leave? I can tell you why. And this is why a lot of women don't leave in Quiverful and a lot of these high demand religious organizations. They're trapped. You have 9, 10 kids. You're living on one income, one small income. And where in the heck are you going to have the money to skedaddle on out of there? It's a system that traps women. And if it works for you, fine. But it doesn't work for a lot of women, and they have no way of getting out. I talked about, well, Susanna could have left. Not with that many children, no income of her own, except for her little businesses. And I'm not sure she ever made much of anything, regardless of what Steve says. And if she did, I don't think it would have been enough to really support the family. You have to think of those things. If you don't have a good support network, you're really screwed. There's no way for you to go anywhere. There's no way for you to get away. It costs money to redo your entire life, to toss everything to the wind and just go. It does. And sometimes it's incredibly painful. So they stay because they believe God's going to change their man and turn him into the righteous Christian man they've always wanted. They stay because there's no money. They stay because they've lost hope. There's so many reasons to stay. So many women just never manage to make it out. And that to me is one of the worst things about it. And I'll say this, there are times when the opposite happens. And I don't think I haven't seen this happen in the church, but I sure enough have seen this happen in the world. I saw it recently happen where someone came into some money and the spouse turned on them, made false claims about domestic violence, and then had them locked up, grabbed the cash, and skedaddled on out of there. I'm watching a situation going on like that now, and I feel bad because basing what has been said by both parties and some of the audio released, I have to say that it looks like the woman has definitely gaslit the man and run off with the lumber. At least we don't see that very often in, in Christian families. I'm going to say that. Very, very seldom. Even though I have seen some Christian men who've gotten crushed when the wives have left and taken everything. Just like I know women who've walked out with what they could carry in a suitcase. We need to start doing better. I mean, if you love Jesus, you're not going to abuse your spouse. You're going to love them and try to build them up. You're going to be there. You're going to be that other half, that side that they need. And sometimes you need to be strong for them. Sometimes, especially if they have something really bad happen with their health, sometimes you are the one that has to be the strong one. It's not a competition. We're all supposed to be playing on the same team, and it's really not all about us anyway. Okay, I'm rambling. I'm rambling. You can tell I'm full of asthma drugs, and I'm about ready to be more full of asthma drugs in a few. Go to bed early. I'm tired. Love you guys. I hope this mess stops. It's a stupid mess, and it really shouldn't happen. Stephen Anderson, step down, please, and learn how to treat your wife like a human being and your children instead of like possessions. Treat them as your precious children. But keep acting like this my boss, and you know what happens to my bosses. They end up dethroned eventually, and a lot of them end up in jail or dead. I would hate to see either of those happen. But if you keep acting like a mob boss, I don't doubt it. It would happen. Love you guys.